$1, shouts the giant cowboy as the trembling girl with a burlap sack over her head stands trembling on the auction block, her educated voice whispering a refined "thank you" that stops him cold. The crowd sneers at what they see as damaged goods, assuming she'll vanish into the mountain wilderness to live out her days in shameful silence. But the cowboy recognizes something extraordinary beneath that coarse fabric, a brilliant mind that powerful men have tried to destroy. In his isolated mountain community, people are dying from preventable diseases while she possesses the very skills that could save them. Yet practicing her forbidden profession means certain death if discovered, and staying hidden means watching innocents perish. Will they risk everything to serve others, or will fear condemn them both to live as shadows of who they truly are? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The basement of Copper Ridge's jailhouse reeked of mold and despair. Amelia Foster sat in the corner of her cramped cell, her hands folded in her lap. 3 months of imprisonment had worn her down, but her spine remained straight. The burlap sack beside her would soon cover her head when they dragged her to the auction block. Sheriff Doyle descended the creaking stairs, his keys jangling with each reluctant step. He avoided her eyes as he unlocked the cell door. "Time to go," he muttered. Amelia stood without protest. She had learned that resistance only made things worse. The sheriff placed the rough sack over her head, and the world disappeared into scratchy darkness. The crowd's jeers hit her before the sunlight did. Even through the burlap, she could feel their hostile stares burning into her skin. Someone spat near her feet. Another voice called her a danger to decent folk. The auctioneer's voice boomed across the dusty main street. "We got ourselves a criminal here. Territorial authorities want her gone. Who'll take her off our hands?" Silence stretched like a taut rope. Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs. No one wanted damaged goods. No one wanted a woman they believed had killed an innocent patient. "Come now, someone's got to bid." More silence. A dog barked in the distance. A wagon creaked past. Then came the sound of boots on wooden planks. Heavy, deliberate steps climbing onto the auction platform. The crowd murmured with curiosity. $1, a deep voice announced. Gasps rippled through the gathering. Amelia felt the platform shake as someone large stepped closer. The auctioneer cleared his throat. "Going once for $1, going twice. Sold to the gentleman." Papers rustled. A pen scratched across parchment. The legal transfer took less than 5 minutes. "You bought yourself a heap of trouble, Cole," someone called from the crowd. "That woman's poison," another voice added. The giant man said nothing. His hand touched Amelia's elbow with surprising gentleness. "Can you walk?" he asked quietly. She nodded beneath the sack. They descended from the platform together, leaving the disappointed crowd behind. The walk to his wagon felt endless. Every step took them past more whispers and pointed fingers. Amelia kept her head down and concentrated on not stumbling. The wagon seat creaked as they both climbed up. Leather reins snapped, and the horses began moving. Copper Ridge slowly fell away behind them. After several minutes of silence, Amelia spoke. "Thank you." The words came out refined and educated. Nothing like what anyone expected from a supposed criminal. Jedediah Cole nearly dropped the reins. That voice belonged in a drawing room, not on an auction block. He glanced sideways at the sacked figure beside him. "What's your name?" he asked. "Amelia." She paused. "Amelia Foster." They rode in silence as the road climbed into pine-covered mountains. The air grew thinner and cleaner. Civilization disappeared behind curtains of evergreen. When one of his horses began favoring its left front hoof, Jedediah pulled the wagon to a stop. He climbed down to examine the animal. "May I look?" Amelia asked. Something in her tone made him step back. She slipped from the wagon seat and approached the horse with confident movements. Her hands moved expertly along the animal's leg, probing and testing despite her covered head. "Stone bruise," she diagnosed. "Not serious, but he needs rest. Do you have any willow bark?" Jedediah stared at her. How do you know that? I know many things. She found his medicine kit in the wagon bed and mixed a simple poultice without hesitation. Her movements were precise and practiced. This was no ordinary criminal. The sun was setting by the time they reached his cabin. Orange light filtered through the pine branches, casting long shadows across the clearing. Smoke curled from the stone chimney. Inside, oil lamps cast warm circles of light across rough wooden walls. Jedediah had built the place with his own hands, and it showed. Everything was sturdy and practical, but comfortable. You can remove that if you want, he said, nodding toward her covered head. Amelia hesitated. Not yet. She sat at his kitchen table, her hands visible below the sack's edge. They were small but steady, with long fingers that spoke of delicate work. Why did you bid on me? She asked. Jedediah poured coffee into 2 tin cups. Seemed like the right thing to do. People will say you're a fool. People say lots of things. She accepted the coffee gratefully. Steam rose around the sack's rough edges. I need to tell you something, she said finally. I'm not what they think I am. What are you then? Amelia was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried a weight that made Jedediah lean forward. I'm Dr. Amelia Foster. I graduated from medical college in Philadelphia. I was the first woman of my kind to practice medicine in Denver Territory. The coffee cup froze halfway to Jedediah's lips. They said I poisoned a patient, she continued. Said I was dangerous. But it wasn't true. I was framed by powerful men who wanted me silenced. Why? Because I refused Judge Morrison's son. Because I fought back when he tried to force himself on me. Because I threatened their idea of how the world should work. Jedediah set down his cup. His weathered hands gripped the table's edge. You're a doctor. I was. Now I'm nothing. My community, he said slowly. People are dying up here. No medical help for 50 miles. Children with fever. Women dying in childbirth. Old folks suffering from things that could be treated. Amelia's head turned toward him, though he couldn't see her eyes. If you practiced again, Jedediah continued, and they caught you, what would happen? Prison. Or worse. And if you don't practice? People die. The fire crackled in the stone hearth. Outside, night sounds filled the mountain air. 2 people sat across from each other, both carrying secrets that could change everything. 2 weeks passed before Amelia made her decision. She had watched Jedediah return from town with increasingly grim news. The Mitchell boy was burning with fever. Mrs. Patterson's baby had taken ill. Old Henrik was coughing blood. I'll do it, she said one evening as they sat by the fire. But no one can see my face. Jedediah nodded. I'll make sure of it. They worked out a system that very night. Patients would come to the back room of the cabin. A heavy curtain would separate Amelia from her visitors. Jedediah would act as her hands when needed, following her precise instructions. The first patient arrived 3 days later. Tommy Mitchell, age 7, barely conscious in his father's arms. His skin burned with fever, and his breathing came in shallow gasps. Behind the curtain, Amelia examined the boy through careful questioning and observation. Her voice remained steady and professional as she diagnosed pneumonia. Willow bark tea every 2 hours, she instructed Jedediah. Steam treatments with pine needles. Keep him warm but not overheated. If the fever breaks, he'll recover. Tom Mitchell Sr. gripped his hat in weathered hands. How much do I owe? Nothing, came the gentle voice from behind the curtain. Just bring him back if he gets worse. Tommy recovered within a week. Word spread quickly through the mountain communities. Sarah Chen arrived next, her infant daughter listless and refusing to nurse. The Chinese woman had walked 15 miles through dangerous terrain, desperation driving her forward. Amelia worked patiently, guiding Sarah through techniques to help the baby latch properly. She mixed a special tea to increase milk production and showed Jedediah how to demonstrate the feeding positions. You saved my daughter's life, Sarah whispered as she prepared to leave. The mysterious voice behind the curtain was kind but firm. Bring her back in 2 weeks. I need to check her progress. Sarah became their first regular ally. She began gathering medical supplies from trading posts across the territory, asking no questions and expecting no explanations. Her discretion was absolute. More patients followed. A miner with a crushed hand, a pregnant woman with complications, an elderly man whose heart was failing. Each case challenged Amelia's skills, but her confidence grew with every success. Jedediah proved to be an excellent assistant. His steady hands and calm demeanor made him perfect for following complex medical instructions. He learned to mix medicines, apply bandages, and assist with minor procedures. "You're a natural," Amelia told him one evening after they had successfully treated a severe burn. "Good teacher," he replied simply. Their partnership deepened beyond the medical work. Jedediah handled all patient interactions while Amelia remained hidden. He collected payments when families insisted on giving something. He spread word carefully through trusted contacts. The cabin transformed into a functioning medical clinic. One room became a surgery area, another stored supplies and medicines. Jedediah built additional shelving and work surfaces to accommodate their growing practice. By winter's arrival, they were seeing patients almost daily. The mysterious mountain healer had become legendary throughout the region. People traveled for days to reach the isolated cabin where miracles happened behind a simple curtain. Mrs. Henderson brought her twin boys when scarlet fever struck. The disease had already claimed 2 children in their settlement. Fear drove her through a dangerous snowstorm to reach help. Amelia worked for hours, carefully managing the boys' treatment while explaining quarantine procedures to their mother. Her voice never wavered, even when the situation looked desperate. Both children survived. Mrs. Henderson returned to her community with medicine and knowledge that saved 6 more lives. The successes brought new challenges. Word was reaching the towns below. Sheriff Doyle began hearing reports of unauthorized medical practice in the mountains. His position required investigation, but his heart wasn't in it. "Someone's playing doctor up there," Deputy Williams reported. "Territorial law says that's illegal without proper licensing." Doyle nodded reluctantly. "I'll look into it." But his investigations remained half-hearted. Too many families were returning from the mountains with healthy children and grateful stories. More dangerous was the arrival of Silas Baines in Copper Ridge. The bounty hunter carried wanted posters and asked pointed questions about missing criminals. "Woman named Amelia Foster," he told anyone who would listen. "Dangerous murderer, $500 reward." He studied faces for recognition. He asked about recent arrivals. He paid particular attention to stories about the mountain healer. "Mighty convenient," Silas mused to the bartender. "Female criminal disappears right when a mysterious lady doctor shows up in the mountains." The bartender shrugged. "Lots of strange folks in these parts." Back at the cabin, Amelia and Jedediah remained unaware of the growing attention. They were focused on their expanding patient load and the trust they were building with mountain families. Sarah Chen brought more than supplies on her visits. She carried news from various communities and helped coordinate care for patients who needed follow-up treatment. "You're becoming famous," she warned Amelia during one visit. "People in 3 territories are talking about the miracle worker." Behind the curtain, Amelia considered this development. Fame meant exposure. Exposure meant danger. "Maybe we should be more careful," she said. But the next day brought a logger with a severed artery. The day after that, a child with a broken leg. Each emergency pushed caution aside in favor of saving lives. Jedediah noticed the change in Amelia as winter progressed. Her voice carried new authority. Her medical decisions came faster and with greater confidence. The brilliant doctor was emerging from years of imposed silence. "You're happy," he observed one evening as they cleaned instruments. "I'm useful," she corrected. "For the first time in years, I'm useful." Their relationship had evolved beyond partnership into something deeper. They worked in perfect synchronization. They anticipated each other's needs. They shared the satisfaction of lives saved and suffering eased, but shadows were gathering. Silas Baines was getting closer to the truth. Sheriff Doyle's investigations were becoming more serious. The territory's officials were taking notice of unauthorized medical practice. The curtain that protected Amelia also isolated her from the community she served. She could hear their gratitude but never see their faces. She could heal their bodies but never fully connect with their lives. Change was coming to the mountain. The only question was whether it would bring vindication or destruction. Spring brought new dangers to the mountain. Silas Baines had spent the winter asking questions and connecting pieces. The bounty hunter's persistence was paying off in ways that threatened everything Amelia had built. Female doctor shows up right when female criminal disappears, Silas told Sheriff Doyle during one of his visits to town. Mighty suspicious timing. Doyle shifted uncomfortably behind his desk. Lots of folks come and go through these parts. This one's special, $500 special. The sheriff had seen too many grateful families returning from the mountains to embrace Silas's theory. But territorial pressure was mounting. Officials in Denver were asking pointed questions about unauthorized medical practice. I'll ride up there next week, Doyle promised, without enthusiasm. At the cabin, Amelia sensed the changing atmosphere. Patients arrived more nervous than before. They looked over their shoulders and spoke in hushed tones about strangers asking questions in town. Sarah Chen brought the most troubling news during her weekly supply run. Bounty hunter's been showing my picture around, old one from Denver newspaper. Amelia's hands stilled over the medicines she was organizing. What kind of questions? About female doctors, about anyone matching your description, about the mountain healer. Jedediah entered the room as Sarah spoke. His face darkened at her words. Time to be more careful, he said firmly. They implemented new security measures immediately. Patients now came only at night. Sarah acted as a lookout during treatments. They established escape routes and hiding places throughout the cabin. But the medical emergencies continued regardless of danger. Mrs. Patterson went into difficult labor during a spring storm. Her husband arrived at the cabin desperate and terrified. Baby's coming wrong, he gasped. Midwife says both might die. Amelia didn't hesitate. She guided Jedediah through the complex process of assisting a breech delivery. Her calm voice behind the curtain coached him through each critical step. Mother and baby survived, but the lengthy procedure required more exposure than ever before. Lamplight had flickered against the curtain for hours. Voices had carried through the thin walls. 2 days later, Silas appeared at Tom Mitchell's door asking about unusual activity in the mountains. Heard there was some commotion at the Patterson place, he said casually. Tom's face remained neutral. Spring storms cause all kinds of commotion. Storms don't deliver babies. Don't know what you're talking about. Silas smiled coldly but got no more information. The mountain families had closed ranks around their mysterious healer. Sheriff Doyle made his promised visit the following week. He rode up to Jedediah's cabin with obvious reluctance, duty warring with conscience. Heard you might have someone practicing medicine without a license, he said. Jedediah stood in his doorway, blocking the view inside. Just me here, Sheriff. Mind if I look around? Got a warrant? Doyle sighed. No warrant, just investigating reports. Behind the cabin's back wall, Amelia crouched in a carefully prepared hiding space. Her medical supplies were concealed beneath floorboards. All evidence of her practice had disappeared within minutes. Reports can be wrong, Jedediah said mildly. The sheriff spent 20 minutes searching but found nothing suspicious. Amelia's hiding place held perfectly. Her supplies remained undetected. Tell whoever's helping folks up here to be careful, Doyle said as he prepared to leave. Territorial officials don't appreciate unauthorized medicine. I'll keep that in mind. But the close call shook everyone's confidence. Several regular patients stopped coming. Others arrived more frightened than before. Maybe we should quit for a while, Jedediah suggested that evening. Amelia emerged from her hiding space dusty and exhausted. People will die without medical care. People will die if you're caught. She cleaned dirt from her clothes with sharp, angry movements. I won't hide while children suffer. Their first real argument erupted that night. Jedediah wanted her to suspend the practice until danger passed. Amelia refused to abandon patients who depended on her. You're being reckless, he said. "I'm being a doctor. Dead doctors help no one." The words hung between them like a challenge. Both recognized the truth in what the other said, but neither would bend. The argument was interrupted by frantic pounding on the door. Henrik Johnson stood outside, supporting his collapsed son. "Please," the old man begged. "Boy can't breathe." Amelia took one look at the situation and made her choice. The young man was having a severe allergic reaction, his throat swelling shut. Minutes mattered more than safety. She worked frantically behind the curtain, guiding Jedediah through an emergency treatment that saved the boy's life. Her medical training trumped all other considerations. As the Johnson family left with profound gratitude, Amelia and Jedediah looked at each other across the room. "I can't stop," she said quietly. "I know. Will you keep helping me?" Jedediah studied her face, seeing determination that reminded him why he had bid on her in the first place. Until the end. Their partnership strengthened through the crisis. They developed better security procedures and more efficient treatment methods. The danger had forced them to become more skilled at their deception. But Silas Baines was getting closer to the truth. He had started questioning patients directly, following tracks in the mountain snow and piecing together patterns of behavior. Sarah Chen reported his growing accuracy during her next visit. "He knows someone's here. He knows it's a woman. He's starting to suspect it's the one he's hunting." The net was tightening around Amelia's secret life. Every patient treated increased the risk of exposure. Every success made her more famous and more vulnerable. Spring was turning toward summer when the avalanche changed everything. A mining accident in the valley below would force Amelia to choose between safety and the oath she had taken as a healer. The choice would expose her to the world and bring all her enemies running, but it would also reveal the truth about who she really was and what she was capable of achieving. The mountain shook at dawn. A deep rumble rolled through the valleys as tons of rock and snow crashed down onto the Copper Ridge mining operation. The avalanche had been building for weeks after unusually heavy spring rains weakened the mountainside. Tom Mitchell burst through Jedediah's door without knocking. His face was pale with panic and streaked with dirt from riding hard through the morning. "Mine's buried," he gasped. 12 men trapped, some hurt bad." Amelia appeared from behind the curtain that had hidden her for months. For the first time since arriving at the mountain, her face was fully visible. High cheekbones and intelligent eyes marked her as someone who had once moved in educated circles. "How bad are the injuries?" she asked. Tom stared at her uncovered face in shock. "You're her. You're really her." "The injuries, Tom. How bad?" He shook himself back to focus. "Broken bones. Bleeding. One man's not breathing right. Doc, they're going to die without help." Amelia looked at Jedediah. They both understood what this meant. No curtain could hide her in a mass casualty situation. No disguise would work when lives hung in the balance. "Get your medical kit," she told Jedediah. "All of it." They loaded the wagon with every supply and instrument they possessed. Bandages, medicines, surgical tools, and the precious bottles of laudanum that dulled the worst pain. The ride down the mountain took 20 minutes through treacherous terrain. Amelia used the time to mentally prepare for what she would find. Mass casualty situations required triage decisions that haunted doctors for years. The mining camp was chaos when they arrived. Families clustered around the avalanche site, some crying, others digging frantically with bare hands. The local supervisor was trying to organize rescue efforts but had no medical training. "Thank God," he said when he saw them. "The healer's here." Amelia stepped from the wagon and surveyed the situation with professional detachment. 3 men had been pulled from the debris. 2 more were being extracted as she watched. All showed signs of serious trauma. "Set up a treatment area there," she instructed, pointing to a flat space near the mine office. "Clear those tables. I need clean water and more light." She moved to the first victim without hesitation. A young miner with a compound fracture of his left arm. Bone protruded through torn flesh, but the bleeding was controlled. "This one first," she announced. "Get me the bone saw and plenty of bandages." The crowd watching her work grew silent. They had expected the mysterious mountain healer to be a gruff old man or perhaps an Indian medicine woman. Instead, they saw a composed young woman with steady hands and absolute confidence. Jedediah worked beside her with practiced efficiency. He had learned her methods well during their months of partnership. His large hands moved with surprising delicacy as he assisted with the delicate procedure. "Next patient," Amelia called as she finished setting the broken arm. A miner with severe chest trauma was carried forward. His breathing was labored and blood frothed at his lips. Internal injuries, possibly fatal without immediate intervention. Amelia worked with intense focus, blocking out everything except the medical emergency in front of her. She had trained for situations like this during her residency in Philadelphia. The skills came flooding back despite years of forced inactivity. 3 hours into the crisis, a commotion at the edge of the crowd caught Jedediah's attention. Silas Baines had arrived, drawn by reports of the disaster and the mysterious healer's public appearance. The bounty hunter pushed through the gathered families until he had a clear view of Amelia working over an injured miner. His eyes widened as he recognized the face from the wanted poster in his pocket. "That's her," he announced loudly. "That's Amelia Foster. The murderer." The crowd turned toward him with confused murmurs. Some had heard rumors about the mountain healer's identity, but most had never connected her to any criminal charges. "She's a killer," Silas continued, his voice carrying across the camp. "Poisoned a man in Denver. There's a $500 bounty on her head." Tom Mitchell stepped forward, his face hard. "She just saved my boy's life." "Don't matter what she did here," Silas replied. "She's wanted for murder." Other voices joined Tom's in defense of the woman who had treated their families. Sarah Chen emerged from the crowd, her usually quiet demeanor replaced by fierce protectiveness. "You leave her alone," Sarah said firmly. "She's helping people." Silas ignored the protests and moved toward Amelia, who continued working on her patient despite the commotion. She had heard every word but refused to abandon the injured miner. "Amelia Foster," Silas called. "You're under arrest." She looked up from her patient for the first time since he had spoken. Blood stained her sleeves and exhaustion lined her face, but her voice remained steady. "This man will die if I stop now." "That's not my problem." The crowd pressed closer, forming a protective circle around the makeshift medical station. Men who had been strangers to Amelia that morning now stood ready to defend her against the bounty hunter. "Get away from our doctor," Henrik Johnson growled. "She's not a doctor. She's a criminal." "She's both," Tom Mitchell said. "And right now, we need the doctor." Silas reached for his gun, but 20 angry mountain men stepped forward in unison. The odds had shifted decisively against him. Sheriff Doyle arrived at that moment, having heard about the mining disaster. He took in the scene with growing understanding. The mysterious mountain healer, the defensive crowd, the frustrated bounty hunter with his hand near his weapon. "Nobody's getting arrested today," Doyle announced firmly. "This woman's saving lives." Silas spun toward him angrily. "Sheriff, that's Amelia Foster. She's wanted by territorial authorities. Today she's a doctor treating injured miners." Everything else can wait. The standoff stretched taut as competing loyalties battled in the mountain air. The tension held for several heartbeats. Then Sarah Chen stepped forward with a folded paper clutched in her weathered hands. "I've been carrying this for 2 months," she announced, waiting for the right time. She handed the paper to Sheriff Doyle, who unfolded it with careful fingers. His eyes widened as he read the contents. "This is a confession letter," he said slowly, "from Robert Morrison, Jr." Amelia's hands stilled over her patient. The name hit her like a physical blow. Doyle continued reading aloud. "Written before his death from consumption last winter. Says he poisoned Thomas Whitmore because the man discovered his gambling debts. Says he let Amelia Foster take the blame because his father threatened to disown him." The crowd fell silent. Even the injured miners stopped groaning to listen. "Judge Morrison covered up his son's crime," Doyle read on. "Destroyed evidence. Bribed witnesses. framed an innocent woman to protect the family name. Silas snatched the letter from the sheriff's hands. Could be forged. It's notarized, Sarah said quietly. Witnessed by 2 people. Robert Morrison confessed on his deathbed to clear his conscience. Amelia felt the world spinning around her. 3 years of running, 3 years of hiding, 3 years of believing herself a murderer in the eyes of the law. Where did you get this? She whispered. Sarah's eyes were kind but firm. My cousin works as a maid in the Morrison house. She was there when he died. She heard him confess and saw him write the letter. Took it after the judge burned the original. Why didn't you give it to me sooner? Because you needed to find yourself again first. Needed to remember who you were before you could face who you'd been forced to become. Sheriff Doyle folded the letter carefully and placed it in his vest pocket. This changes everything. All charges against Amelia Foster are hereby dismissed. Silas's face darkened with rage. You can't just dismiss territorial charges. I can, and I did. This woman was framed for murder. The real killer confessed. Case closed. I'm still taking her in. $500 is $500. The bounty hunter's hand moved toward his weapon again, but the mountain men stepped closer. Their faces showed no mercy for someone who would ignore justice for money. You'll have to go through all of us, Tom Mitchell said evenly. Henrik Johnson cracked his knuckles. Be happy to accommodate you. Silas looked around the circle of hostile faces and slowly moved his hand away from his gun. He was outnumbered 20-1 by men who owed their lives or their children's lives to the woman he wanted to capture. This isn't over, he snarled. Yes, it is, Sheriff Doyle replied. You're officially ordered to cease pursuit of Amelia Foster. Any further harassment will result in your arrest. The bounty hunter pushed through the crowd and mounted his horse. He rode away without looking back, his hopes of easy money disappearing with each hoofbeat. Amelia turned back to her patient, but her hands were shaking now. The emotional impact of vindication was overwhelming her professional composure. I need a minute, she said quietly. Jedediah took over the medical care while she stepped away from the crowd. The weight of years of false guilt was lifting from her shoulders, but the process felt like tearing away pieces of herself. Sarah followed her to a quiet spot near the mine office. Why? Amelia asked. Why did you wait so long to give me the letter? Because the woman who was sold on that auction block couldn't have handled the truth. She was broken, ashamed, ready to disappear forever. Sarah gestured toward the medical station where Jedediah was following Amelia's instructions to treat another patient. But the woman who's been healing people in these mountains is strong enough to reclaim her life, strong enough to face the world as Dr. Amelia Foster again. Tears ran down Amelia's cheeks for the first time since her imprisonment. I can practice medicine legally. You can do anything you want. You're free. The word tasted strange after years of hiding. Free to use her real name. Free to practice openly. Free to build a life without looking over her shoulder. She wiped her eyes and returned to the medical station. There were still patients to treat, injuries to mend, lives to save. But now she worked as herself, rather than as a shadow. Word of her vindication spread through the crowd like wildfire. The mysterious mountain healer had been revealed as an innocent woman wrongly accused. The story would travel to every settlement in 3 territories before sunset. By evening, all the injured miners had been treated and transported to comfortable recovery locations. 3 men who would have died without immediate medical intervention were expected to make full recoveries. Sheriff Doyle approached Amelia as she cleaned her instruments. Territorial governor wants to meet you, he said. Seems words reached Denver about the first legal female doctor in Colorado Territory. Amelia looked up from her work. Legal? Your medical license was never officially revoked, just suspended pending investigation. Investigation's over. You're officially Dr. Amelia Foster again. She sat down heavily on a wooden crate, overwhelmed by the rapid changes in her circumstances. This morning she had been a criminal in hiding. Tonight she was a respected physician with official recognition. Jedediah joined them, his shirt stained with blood from the day's emergency work. "What happens now?" he asked. Amelia looked around at the families who had defended her, the sheriff who had protected her, and the man who had saved her from the auction block. "Now we build something permanent," she said. "A real clinic. A place where anyone can get medical care regardless of who they are or where they come from." Tom Mitchell overheard and grinned. These mountains could use a real doctor. Then these mountains will have one. The sun was setting behind the peaks, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Amelia Foster stood in the middle of a mining camp, no longer hiding her face or her identity. For the first time in years, she was exactly who she was supposed to be. 6 months after the avalanche, Copper Ridge looked like a different town. The wooden sign at the main entrance now read, "Home of Dr. Amelia Foster, first licensed female physician in Colorado Territory." Visitors came from hundreds of miles away seeking the legendary doctor who had risen from disgrace to become a symbol of justice. The old mining office had been transformed into a proper medical clinic. Clean white walls replaced rough wooden planks. Glass cabinets held organized supplies and instruments. A waiting area with comfortable chairs welcomed patients from across the territory. Amelia stood in her clinic's main room, reviewing patient files with the same methodical precision she had once hidden behind curtains. Her reputation had spread far beyond the mountain communities. Families traveled for weeks to receive treatment from the doctor who had defeated false accusations and corrupt judges. The territorial governor had personally restored her medical credentials during a ceremony in Denver. Newspaper reporters from 3 states had covered the story of the wrongfully accused physician who continued healing people even while branded a criminal. But the greatest changes were personal ones. Amelia no longer flinched when patients looked directly at her face. She signed her real name on medical documents without hesitation. The woman who had once hidden beneath burlap sacks now stood proud and confident in her chosen profession. Jedediah entered the clinic carrying lumber for the expansion project. The demand for medical services had grown so rapidly that they needed twice the space. "Foundations finished," he announced. "Should have the new surgery room completed by winter." Their partnership had evolved far beyond the desperate alliance formed during those first hidden months. Jedediah had become a skilled medical assistant, capable of handling routine treatments independently. More importantly, he had become the person Amelia trusted most in the world. Sarah Chen arrived for her weekly visit, bringing supplies and news from the various mountain settlements. Her role as unofficial coordinator had made the widespread medical practice possible. "Mrs. Patterson's baby is walking now," Sarah reported. "Tommy Mitchell starts school next month. The Henderson twins are completely recovered from the scarlet fever." Each success story reminded Amelia why she had chosen to risk everything for the practice of medicine. Lives saved, suffering eased, families kept together through medical intervention. The afternoon brought a familiar knock on the clinic door. Sheriff Doyle entered with his hat in his hands and a nervous expression on his weathered face. "Got a request from Denver," he said. "They want you to establish a medical school here. Train other doctors to serve remote communities." Amelia set down her pen and studied the official documents he presented. The territorial government was offering substantial funding for a formal medical training program. "They want me to teach? They want you to build something permanent, something that will last beyond any one person." The proposal was ambitious. Students would come from across the Western Territories to study medicine in the mountains. Graduates would return to their home communities as trained physicians, spreading medical knowledge to previously underserved areas. Jedediah looked up from his carpentry work. "You'd be good at teaching. It would mean staying here permanently, building a life in these mountains. Is that what you want?" Amelia considered the question seriously. A year ago, she had been a fugitive with no future beyond survival. Now she was being offered the chance to shape the future of medicine across the frontier. "Yes," she said finally, "this is where I want to be." The decision made, preparations began immediately. The clinic expansion would include classroom space and dormitory facilities for students. Sarah coordinated with communities across the territory to identify promising candidates for medical training. Word of the upcoming medical school attracted attention from established physicians in Denver and Colorado Springs. Some supported the innovative approach to frontier medicine. Others questioned whether proper medical education could occur in such remote circumstances. Dr. Harrison Mills arrived from Denver to assess the proposed program. He was a distinguished physician with considerable influence over territorial medical policies. Amelia welcomed him into her clinic with professional courtesy but underlying tension. Men like Mills had once dismissed her as unsuitable for medical practice. Now she needed his endorsement to make her school a reality. Mills spent 3 days observing Amelia's work. He watched her perform complex surgeries with primitive equipment. He saw her teach mountain families about hygiene and disease prevention. He witnessed the profound respect and trust she commanded throughout the region. "Your methods are unconventional," he admitted on his final day. "Frontier medicine requires adaptation. But your results are undeniable. I'll recommend full approval for your medical school." The endorsement cleared the final bureaucratic obstacles. Construction began on the expanded facility that would serve as both clinic and educational institution. As autumn arrived, Amelia found herself planning a future she had never dared imagine. The medical school would open the following spring with its first class of 12 students. Applications had arrived from across the Western Territories. One evening, as they worked together organizing the new classroom space, Jedediah set down his tools and faced Amelia directly. "Marry me," he said simply. She looked up from the medical textbook she was arranging. "Is that a question or a statement?" "It's whatever you want it to be." Their relationship had grown gradually from desperate partnership to deep affection to something approaching love. But they had never discussed marriage formally. "Yes," she said without hesitation. The wedding took place on the first anniversary of the avalanche that had changed everything. The ceremony was held in the clinic's main room, surrounded by the medical equipment that represented Amelia's reclaimed identity. She wore a white dress sewn by the women of Copper Ridge. But her veil was special. The original burlap sack that had once hidden her shame had been transformed into delicate lace, embroidered with wildflowers by grateful patients. Tom Mitchell's wife had spent months creating the symbolic transformation. What had once represented bondage and disgrace now crowned a woman who had reclaimed her life and chosen her future. Sheriff Doyle performed the ceremony in his capacity as territorial official. Sarah Chen served as maid of honor. The congregation included every family Amelia had treated during her months of secret practice. The vows they exchanged were simple but profound. Jedediah promised to support Amelia's medical calling and the school they would build together. Amelia promised to share her life with the man who had seen her worth when the world saw only damaged goods. As they kissed to seal their marriage, sunlight streamed through the clinic windows and illuminated the waiting room where tomorrow's patients would seek healing. The medical school opened 6 months later with students eager to learn from the legendary Dr. Foster. The first graduation ceremony produced 12 new physicians who dispersed across the frontier to serve communities that had never seen trained medical care. Years passed. The school's reputation grew. Hundreds of doctors trained in the Colorado mountains carried Amelia's methods and principles throughout the expanding territories. The woman who had once stood on an auction block with a sack over her head became one of the most respected medical educators in the American West. Her story inspired countless others who faced seemingly impossible circumstances. But perhaps the most important transformation was the simplest one. Amelia Foster had learned to see herself as the world now saw her, not as someone marked by false accusations and past trauma, but as a healer, teacher, and pioneer who had turned suffering into service. The sack that had once hidden her face now hung framed in the medical school's main hall. A plaque beneath it read, "From shame to honor, from hiding to healing, from silence to service, the journey of Dr. Amelia Foster."